Hello, welcome to Ray-ality TV. I'm Raymond Bakari, and today I'm joined by Secretary of State here in Rhode Island and now 2022 Rhode Island Gubernatorial candidate, Secretary of State Nellie Gorbea. Secretary Gorbea, how are you today?
Very well, thanks, Ray.
And no problem. Thank you for coming on the show. It's a pleasure of mine to have you on. Just diving right into it here, you're now running for governor in the 2022 Democratic primary. What made you want to run to be the next governor?
You know, I'm running for governor because I want to make government work for people. And you'll see that in my life, I've always worked to bring diverse voices to the table, connect people with opportunities that help them thrive. And I think there's no better place to do that from than the governor's chair.
And whenever it comes to the speculation leading into the election cycle, there was always articles about potential candidates for 2022, the gubernatorial election, and your name had always popped up on those articles on the list. Was the plan always to run for governor in 2022, or was there like a plan to run for lieutenant governor or a different office?
No, the plan was always for me to run for Secretary of State. And then once I was in the chair of Secretary of State, I said, you know what, this is going really, really well. And I felt very strongly that given where we are in Rhode Island and in our country, that these are times that require this kind of different leadership. It's a critical moment for Rhode Island, and our decisions over the next few years on education, affordable housing, climate change are going to be shaping our state and our economy for decades. So really, the one spot that can help you do all those things is the governor's chair, and so that's what I'm going to be running for.
And you had mentioned a few towards the end of the answer, a few of the issues that will be on a lot of voters' minds as they vote in the Democratic primary come September next year. What are some of the key issues that you plan to focus on in the campaign?
Well, I believe very strongly that in order to have a more just and equitable economy in our state, we need to focus on education, housing, climate change. And by that, I mean both the opportunities that climate change is providing us in terms of renewable energy and the challenges that climate change is bringing to, the ocean state. Those three areas really feed very strongly into our economy. And I feel very strongly that we need to be focusing on Rhode Island with regards to the economy. We have some great assets in our marine economy, or also called the blue economy, our manufacturing sector, our hospitality and tourism. These are all really wonderful parts of Rhode Island's economy that I think with a little bit more attention, we can become serious regional, if not national leaders.
And before we shift to the issues for a moment, the 2022 Democratic primary is probably going to see maybe 5, 6, 7 candidates. Right now, aside from yourself, there's Governor Dan McKee, who's the incumbent, who has shown his intentions to run for re-election, and Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz, who is also running in the Democratic primary. And then with the expected additions, probably this time in around the fall, General Treasurer Magaziner and Providence Mayor Jorge Lorza are most likely going to enter the primary. Are there any concerns that since there's going to be around 6 candidates, that the vote could be split in, say, 5 or 6 ways, and that could give Governor McKee an advantage and ease through the primary with the plurality?
I'll leave it to the pundits to debate all sorts of ways in which the votes could be divided up. I just know that when I go out on the street in Rhode Island, when I go to a grocery store, or when I go just on the parades this weekend, the Bristol parade or the Gaspee parade a week back, I have regular Rhode Islanders coming up to me and thanking me for the work that I've done, thanking me for deciding to run for office, for being straight up with them and saying, I'm glad you're running for governor. And I think, it's going to be an exciting race. And I really feel that there's a path to win it, and that it is my leadership and the evidence of what I've done in office that's going to motivate Rhode Islanders to come out in record numbers for me.
And this governor's race is probably going to be bigger than both 2014 and 2010 combined. But now looking at the issues, some of the issues that you would probably have to address if elected governor come January 2023, one of them is the tolling on trucks. Where do you stand on the truck tolls in Rhode Island?
The truck tolls at this point are a part of our governmental system, and I don't see changing it at this point.
And there are concerns that there could be a precedent set during the legal battles because it's currently in legal limbo with the truck drivers association, and it's currently in legal limbo. There's concerns that say, for example, the judge says you can't just have it be only trucks, that it could set a precedent saying, well, now we have to do it to cars. I know the speaker on the show had said that it's set into law that it can't be set to cars, but he said that as long as the House, Senate, and governor agree, then it could go to cars. If elected governor, do you plan on extending the tolls to cars?
I don't see any way in which we would extend this to cars. I really
And
don't.
And while we're still on the topic of issues pertaining to vehicles, another big one is the car tax, the car tax phase out. It made it into this budget, and it's going to be probably definitely a big issue on voters' minds heading into 2022. If I recall correctly, the last time the car tax phase out was this close to being fully phased out, Governor Kachuri set it back due to financial hardships facing the state. And now we're in the final year of this phase out plan. And the concern is, will it get kicked back to the full effect if the state can't afford it? Are you in favor of or against getting rid of the car tax once and for all?
I believe that the car tax should be eliminated. I support getting rid of it. It was a regressive tax. It really is very, it impacts households very disproportionately and unfairly. And so I'm glad to see it go away. And I'm hopeful that, given the next few years of federal funding, we're able to, manage the budget. I'm hopeful that as governor, I can come in and find some other savings that help us address some of the structural budgetary problems that have been plaguing the Rhode Island state budget. But the car tax is not the way to do it.
And another issue that you had mentioned towards your first answer on the issues you plan to focus on was affordable housing and housing in general. This is definitely going to be one of the most talked about issues throughout this Democratic primary, and it could be approached with multiple avenues. How would you tackle this issue as governor?
Well, first of all, let me say that I have been working on housing issues through most of my professional life. And most recently, before I was Secretary of State, I was Executive Director for Housing Works, Rhode Island, which worked to not only pass affordable housing bond issues, but work to make it sink into the leadership of our state that housing is an economic development issue. And so thankfully, under Governor Gina Raimondo's leadership, we finally got some progress on making some impact in terms of a line item in the budget. But that's not enough. Having a set aside, and even as generous as the bond issues are, that's not really going to put a dent in the issue if we don't address some other real structural barriers. And Rhode Island has a supply and demand issue with housing that is what has resulted in this persistent affordability problem. We have problems with local zoning restrictions. They're a huge barrier to developing the supply of housing that we need to meet the demand. I mean, we're currently, as a state, doing barely like 1,000 building permits. We need to go more to like 5,000. And so if you increase the supply of housing, you are able to lower prices and to help address the need for having more housing. And by reducing those barriers, we can also not just build more housing for families, but we can relocate our seniors. We can address the need for housing for young people who are venturing out on their own. And it's the kind of policy that will absolutely attract people to our state, because you'll see it in the economy. So now the House recently has established a commission to study some of these issues around land use, development, and regulation and housing. And I really hope that this commission brings forward some really great ideas that we can implement to address this issue of housing in our state. But in the end, the legislature can only pass the laws. It is up to the executive branch, the governor, to actually implement them. And that's where I believe that my track record will be what Rhode Islanders will be looking at and seeing that when I say that I'm going to do something, I will.
And another priority amongst voters' minds that will most likely be addressed in the special legislative session this fall is the legalization of marijuana in the state. And it's most likely going to pass before the gubernatorial election is decided, way before the primary, but it'll still have a presence in the policy discussions in this election cycle. Where do you stand on the legalization of marijuana in Rhode Island?
Well, first of all, it'll be interesting to see whether it actually does get taken up either in the fall or next session. I think it's hard to predict at this point. This has been a tough issue for me as a mom. I would be lying to you if I didn't say that. And so I'm looking closely at what other states are doing and what have been the consequences. I think it's really an area that we need to learn from. Um, you know, it does look like we are going to have to support, legalizing marijuana responsibly. But as part of that, I want to make sure that people who have been incarcerated or somehow convicted of marijuana related crimes have their records expunged, because we shouldn't be holding people back for things that are now considered legal under the law. So that would be another, in addition to making sure that we do this legalization responsibly, I would be very much focused on making sure that either people who are incarcerated or have had records developed because of marijuana related crimes, that those be expunged.
And another issue that you touched upon towards the beginning is education. That's also going to be a big issue heading into 2022. There's multiple avenues that this issue also gets approached by within multiple discussions of certain policies, like the expansion of charter schools or like providing a moratorium so there can't be an expansion of certain charter schools. And it's consistently in the discussions when talking about the issue of education. Where do you stand on the expansion of charter schools in Rhode Island?
First and foremost, the goal here should be that all children in Rhode Island have access to a quality education. And really, we need to make sure that in particular public school students have access to equitable learning opportunities with an education system that prepares them for the future. And in fact, I believe that every child in Rhode Island has a right to a public education, and a constitutional amendment should be made to our Constitution for that. We need to prioritize this is for our children. And we need to look at the structural challenges of how we fund education and what's the impact of that. Charter schools are here to stay. We're not going back to an all non charter school system, but we have to make sure that in the process of having charter schools, that we don't lose sight of the fact that we need to provide an equitable education for all Rhode Island children, because otherwise our economy is not going to grow. And so, yeah, that's where I stand on that.
And do you think the proposed charter school moratorium is the way to achieve that goal?
I don't like the moratorium. I think it's very unfortunate and speaks to a breakdown in a really serious issue. And I would look to ways in which to bridge things. I mean, there were students and parents and teachers that had made plans based on some proposed charters that had already passed, and I think that's really unfortunate. But we definitely need to have a conversation on education that doesn't pit one group of students against the other, or one set of teachers against the other, or some parents versus the other. And we need to prioritize public education. I've worked on tough community problems before, and I look forward to putting my skills and my experience on solving community problems to addressing this issue.
And another one of the proposed pieces of legislation that has been brought up mainly by the House Republican caucus in the State House is school choice, where the funding would follow students as opposed to the schools, and children wouldn't be limited to their educational opportunities by their zip code. Would a Governor Gorbea administration support those proposals for school choice in the state?
Now, Governor Gorbea is going to be much more focused on the existing public school system and improving it and making sure that all of our children have access to education before we start on some other different path.
So kind of a wait and see approach, or just outright not in favor of those
No,
proposals?
right now, I mean, I think that those particular proposals have not really provided the kinds of success that they're touted with, and so I'm not interested in going in that direction.
And there are a lot of other topics that I want to focus on in regards to the gubernatorial election, and some of them are worthy of an interview of their own. But these next few, I want to ask in a lightning round format, so like one after another. So this first one is: are you in favor of or opposed to a line item veto power for the governor?
Sure. Yes.
Should the state open up an inspector general's office?
I'm not as sure about that one. I'm still looking at that particular policy issue. I'm not a big one on creating new bureaucracies.
Are you in favor of or opposed to keeping the Rhode Island Promise program permanent?
Yes, the Rhode Island Promise program, I think at this point needs to be integrated into our educational offerings.
And another issue, not necessarily issue, another discussion that's been brought up ever since the transition from Lieutenant Governor McKee to then becoming governor, and his process when he selected lieutenant governor, was those two offices running on the same ticket, like how it's done in Mass and Connecticut. Should the governor and lieutenant governor run on the same ticket?
I think that we absolutely need to look at the office of the lieutenant governor. It was created at a time when that made sense to have a lieutenant governor, right? Um, Back in the 1700s or the 1800s, if the governor went from Providence to Narragansett, they were incommunicado, and you needed somebody to be in charge. You had people, the men who held these offices died by the age of 50, that kind of thing. So but times are different now, and so I think that we should be re-examining whether we should have a lieutenant governor at all. In some states, it's the Secretary of State, for example, that holds those powers, or the lieutenant governor is both Secretary of State and lieutenant governor. Things like that. I don't think it necessarily has to be tied to the governor's office at all. And I welcome a robust conversation, because it's a good chunk of money in our budget, and a number of FTEs that they might be better used elsewhere.
And now, taking a shift away from the political issues and the gubernatorial election, there were a lot of things you had done during your time as Secretary of State, and one of them that I wanted to highlight in particular was promoting the importance of civic and education and engagement. Can you explain for those watching why civic education and engagement are important?
Oh my gosh. I think if anything, the last few years have taught us a lot about why civic education matters. And it's why I took it on from the minute I became Secretary of State back in 2014, way before all of this happened, to show us the need for greater civic education in our country. Getting involved and being informed are how you become part of your community, and making sure that all of our citizens are able to participate thoughtfully and with knowledge as to why they're doing what they're doing helps us build a stronger and more equitable Rhode Island. Your voices and opinions need to be heard by your elected leaders. And in order to be taken into consideration when these decisions are made about your lives, you absolutely have to exercise your right to vote. You absolutely have to exercise your voice in the processes of government. So I was very happy to see legislation pass in the General Assembly this session that calls for proficiency in civics education for middle and high school students, beginning with the 2022-2023 academic year. That is really important, and what's really important too is that it includes an understanding of federal, state, and local government. As I said before, from the minute I came into this office, I have partnered with schools, with teachers, with homeschooling parents to make sure that they have the tools they need to teach Rhode Island civics and Rhode Island education. So I look forward to deploying those resources even in an even larger way as we go forward.
And you also award 2 high school juniors from every high school in the state each year with the Civics Leadership Award. And I'm totally not bringing this up because I was awarded it in 2019 when my school nominated me. But since there will be a new Secretary of State after the 2022 elections, are there any plans to keep that award going, either as governor, or have you spoke with the office to maybe ask the new Secretary of State to keep that award going?
Well, I'll say this. It had been done before I was Secretary of State. I'm one for, being honest about what you've accomplished and what you have inherited. So I did inherit that award. So I have full expectation that it will continue going into the future. The important changes that I made to that program, I think, respect the changing times that we're in. And when I came in, the award was supposed to be, the nominees were supposed to be a boy and a girl from every single school. And speaking to and addressing concerns by someone who brought it up, why have to be gender specific? There are people now who don't identify as a particular gender. And so I thought it was time to revise that policy. And so now it's just 2 students from any school. The other change that I made was to switch it from having it be a senior to receive it, or seniors to receive it, to juniors, because I felt that it would make a bigger impact in that student's lives as they go to apply for colleges and other programs than if it would happen during, the second part of their senior year.
It most certainly had a presence on my resume and my college application. But now shifting to my final question that I ask everyone on the show to keep tradition here, and that is, in your opinion, what do you think Rhode Island is best known for?
I think Rhode Island is best known for being an independently spirited kind of community. It's one of the things that I love about our state, that it brings a variety of communities together into this lively experiment. And from it, we get really wonderful things like I said, our manufacturing, our small businesses in every single geography and ethnic and socioeconomic groups. And it's part of what I love about our state is the diversity that it has.
And Secretary Gorbea, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure of mine to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray. I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to having more conversations because it's still a ways to September of 2022.
Got over a year out, and you're always welcome back on, as with anybody that's been previously interviewed on Ray-ality TV. Thank you once again for watching this episode of Ray-ality TV. If you want to see future episodes as soon as they're posted on this channel, please click the subscribe button down below, along with the post notification bell icon to the right of it. I'm Raymond Bakari, and I'll see you on the next episode.